Great. Okay, and now I am going to share my screen. So as I said, the beginning of this session is going to be a presentation, and then I'll take questions and answers afterwards. And there we go. Great. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for putting your introductions in the chat. My name is Emily Serafy-Cox. I am a foundation officer here at the Peace Development Fund. For those of you who have known me for a little bit, you might notice an additional letter in my name. To celebrate my 40th birthday, I added back the Z in my family's name that was taken from them when they came to this country at the beginning of the 20th century. So that's just a tiny bit about me. Today's webinar is going to be about the community organizing grants at the Peace Development Fund. Our agenda today is a little bit of history and information about the values of the Peace Development Fund. We're going to have an overview of our grants program that we have. We have a few different grants programs, but an overview of the community organizing grants specifically. Talk about the funding criteria, the application process, what it means to partner with PDF, what our program offerings are, of course, money, but beyond that, and then kind of end with a summary. And as I said, time for questions and answers. So the history of the Peace Development Fund is that it was founded in 1981 as a public foundation. A public foundation means that we raise money from the public in order to give out in grants. So we don't have some rich donor who donated all their money and we're just spending down an endowment. We every year are out there fundraising, like you all are, to raise the money to do our programs. The Peace Development Fund was founded as the name implies, as a peace organization that was heavily focused on, it was on the heels of the Vietnam War, so heavily focused on anti-war organizing, anti-nuclear organizing was some of the big first things that the Peace Development Fund did. And over time, transformed how we were thinking and talking about peace, so that peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice. And I have a lot more to say about that, but this is a shortened version. One of the ways that the Peace Development Fund expresses that vision, that value of justice as being the path forward is that we as an organization want to invest in the movement for justice, all of the movements for justice that are building power for folks in communities of all sorts across the land. So the way that we do that as a public foundation with limited resources is to invest in the seedlings of the movement. So we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by seedlings, but generally we're talking about small community-based organizations, organizations that are doing grassroots work in marginalized communities across the country and in certain parts of non-US places. So we'll talk about that too. So our mission is that PDF works to build the capacity of community-based organizations through grants, training, and other resources as I was talking about before, partners in human rights and social justice movements. So I'm gonna share, oh, you know what? I need to need to reshare because I don't think that I shared in order to share the sound. And this is a video. So I'm going to stop my
Emily,
share for just one moment. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think my
Please.
colleague's in the meeting room trying to get into the Zoom.
I just let somebody in. I don't see, maybe that was the person. I don't see anybody in the waiting room right now.
Oh, she's in. Okay, thank you.
Great. Yes. Apologies. I am a one-person show at the moment. But please, if other folks are waiting in the waiting room that you know of, please alert me. Okay, share sound and optimize for video clip. Here we are. Great. Okay. So this is a video that the Peace Development Fund had made to celebrate our 40th anniversary, which we celebrated last year in 2021. And it talks a bit more about the values and history of the Peace Development Fund, as well as our current outlook and kind of what our vision is for the future. So I'm just gonna play a bit of this.
If someone is screaming in my face and I punch them and knock them unconscious, they're not screaming at me anymore. Did I just create peace by punching this person in the face? As absurd as that example is, this is how our society tries to create peace. Mass incarceration, if we just lock up all the criminals, then we'll have peace. If all the Black Lives Matter protesters would just shut up, then we'll have peace. But in reality, in a world where violence has become so normalized, peace is a messy process because it requires justice, and justice is loud.
So the Peace Development Fund started as a consequence of the nuclear weapons freeze campaign. We called it the Nuclear Weapons Moratorium. And we were all focused at that time in the early days on issues of peace and disarmament, particularly nuclear disarmament. And at the same time, we realized there was almost no funding available for grassroots groups. And it was only grassroots groups that were going to bring about change in people's attitude. So a few of us decided that we would start a fund that would fund exclusively grassroots work.
All 5 programs are the Sustainability Project, the Community Organizing Grants Docket, the Donor Advised Funds, Fiscal Sponsorship Program, and the Special Initiatives. We understand and believe that folks in the community know what they need. So our job is to get them resources. We have folks in our systems by design who are part of those movements. That gives it strength and capacity and credibility and respect and trust. So when we're sitting down across the table from somebody in the community who's just meeting us for the first time, we're not bringing BS, we're bringing real experience. And that's that authentic relationship on which we base our grant making. Our job is to get resources and try to get it to you. And your job is to do what you need to do in your communities, not us to tell you that.
BASE was the Building Action for Sustainable Environments. And it brought together 15, 16 communities that were all living near some chain of the nuclear cycle. For the first time that I've ever known, bringing all of the pieces of that chain together, all of the links of that chain together, so we can see the entire arc of the nuclear industry. And this isn't just unique to BASE. There's such a need for grassroots organizations to come and meet each other and to do collective visioning and collective strategizing, but then no one has the time to organize these big types of gatherings. In a lot of the initiatives that we put on, PDF took on that role, where we would pull together groups of 40, 50 different activist organizations and give them 3 or 4 days. And again, it wasn't like an agenda that we planned, but we kind of handed it over to them and saying, we'll fund this gathering, we'll do all of the logistics, we'll buy all the plane tickets, and you all figure out what you need to talk about.
All these people were coming together and bringing a bunch of organizers into a room that were willing and committed to figuring out how are we able to support each other, how are we able to address our cultural differences. Having people on the board was a very important issue, to have the representation that we needed to understand what was happening in the indigenous world and the issues that we needed to address from a grassroots perspective, to ensure that we were being able to fund the communities at the level that we were.
And it was oftentimes a messy process, right? Because it is such a new thing. It wasn't always perfect. It wasn't always clean. We had arguments. But I think the fact that we had arguments with our grantees says a lot, right? Like, how many foundations have the type of relationships where they can have real conflict with their grantees and get through it and never question that the funding would be cut because we were having this conflict? There was already the relationship and the trust that allowed us to go to that depth, that allowed the grantees to trust that, oh, PDF is really serious when they say that we're gonna try this thing called co-creation. We're gonna try to actually co-create this initiative with the grantees, with PDF just being one of the people that had a seat at the table.
And how could we build a movement that would allow us to see the movement as a whole rather than individual movements going on in individual communities? How do we build a movement that is sustainable? What is it going to look like when you have your son? What are the next 7 generations going to look like?
There's a few more minutes of this video, but for time purposes, I'm gonna stop it there. So we're gonna move on. Paul talked about the 5 main programs: the community organizing grants, fiscal sponsorship, sustainability project, and the special initiatives, as well as donor advised funds. I put donor advised funds up in the little corner here because it's a little separate from the work that we're talking about today. And really, we're going to concentrate on the community organizing grants, which, as you see here, is we collect about 150 to 200, that says 250, it should say 200 applications per year. Additionally, the sustainability project and capacity building work that we've done with our grantees is connected to our community organizing grants, as well as to our fiscal sponsorship program. And the special initiatives are also connected to both community organizing grants and fiscal sponsorship. So that's kind of an overview of our core programs. Now, this is like a thumbnail of the community organizing grants itself. As I was talking about, and as they talked about in the video, concentrating on small organizations, organizations that are led by the people most impacted by the issue that they're working on, whatever issue that may be, that they are doing community organizing work to address the root cause of that issue as well. So that's kind of a quick thumbnail summary, but we're going to get into some more detail. So as I said, 150 to 200 applications. We have an open application process. Anybody can apply to the Peace Development Fund. There's not like an invite process. There's an application that's going to be live on our website later this week. And from that process, we get about 20 to 30 grants at the end. It's a long process. There's a lot of review that goes into it, as well as interviews, and we'll talk about that timeline. But just to let you know kind of about what the competitiveness is of these grants. So the community organizing grants umbrella it includes 4 different grant programs. Again, I'm putting one thing off to the side here, which is the DeColoris Rapid Response Fund grants. Those are open all year round, and while their criteria relates very much to what I'm talking about here today, the process is different. And so I'm putting a pin in that, but putting it aside. So the 3 different sections of the community organizing grants that are involved in our end of the year application process are the board docket, which is changing its name soon. They're going to be selecting a more exciting name than that. Braiding New Worlds, which is our new fund that was opened to celebrate our 40th anniversary and which focuses on youth organizing. And the Pioneer Valley Community Advised Fund, which also is going to be changing its name soon, potentially to expand its geographic scope. Not exactly sure. The grant making committee is going to make a lot of those decisions. So one of the things that you'll see here is that both Braiding New Worlds and the PVCAF are decided on by grant making committees. PVCAF, has a geographic location here in where the PDF office is in Western Massachusetts. And specifically the 3 counties that make up the Pioneer Valley of Massachusetts. So that's Hamden, Hampshire, and Franklin County here in Massachusetts. So the average grant size is somewhat comparable. The Pioneer Valley grants tend to be a little smaller, but about $5,000 for the other grants. And but very different sizes. So the board docket is by far our largest, and that's where we have about 20 to 25 groups. This says 20 to 30, but that may include some of the other sections as well. And that gives the biggest chunk of our grant making funds that are what I call PDF directed grant making. We have our donor advised fund grants that are separate and our fiscal sponsorship grants that are separate, but these are the community organizing grants. So, so one application applies for all of these, and it just depends on whether or not you are in the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts as to whether or not you would qualify for that fund, and whether or not you engage in youth organizing, about whether or not you would qualify for that fund. But all applications will be considered for the board docket as well. So our annual grant making has been increasing over the last handful of years, and that's really exciting. You can see a big jump here in 2022 with the addition of Braiding New Worlds, and that's just something I want to highlight. It's really exciting to see, and we're hoping to see that the 2023 level bump up even a little more. So now we're going to talk about the criteria that we use when selecting our grantees. We utilize something called the 4 pillars of grant making. This is a rubric that our board of directors created quite a few years ago, actually. And just last year, they took a look at them again and said, does any of this need to be kind of refreshed? And they decided no, that the criteria that they had laid out before was still relevant. And I think it speaks to the idea that we're a foundation that doesn't focus on any particular issue. We're not focused on education instead of, or we're not focused on education alone or health alone or reproductive rights or climate change or any of the other many social justice issues that exist in the world. We are open to all of those. And it's really about how an organization does its work, what sort of power they're building with the community. That's how we evaluate an organization. I think that makes us pretty nimble, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited about the Peace Development Fund and our grant making. So what do these 4 pillars mean? I'll speak about them briefly. but you can find out more information in our grant guidelines, of course. So organizing to shift power is community organizing that is building power in a community that otherwise might not have the power that it needs for self-determination or to make the sort of change that that they need to see for their community members, whatever sort of community that is. Working to build a movement is about, especially because we're investing in small grassroots organizations, we know that that small grassroots organizations are stronger together when we're building a larger movement together. And so, partnerships both with other organizations as well as maybe other geographies or other issue areas within your same geography, those are just, partnerships and building as a part of something bigger. Dismantling oppression. I think it's obvious that if you're doing community organizing around an issue trying to address oppression, you're attempting to dismantle oppression. And that's oppression that's, as it were, external to your organization. We also, the most competitive organizations are also dismantling oppression within their own organization because we know that these structures are endemic in everything that we do, and we don't want to be recreating systems of oppression within the organizations that are created to try and dismantle oppression. And obviously that's a process, not a place. So then the fourth pillar is creating new structures. The structures that exist are structures of oppression and were created by those who are and have historically been in power. And so in order to achieve justice in our communities, creating new structures, be they educational structures or structures within the mind of ourselves and our fellow community members, be they structures, financial structures, literal building structures, whatever it is that needs to be built for a particular community, that's creating new things. We also have always highlighted youth leadership, and within all of these pillars is highlighting grassroots leadership. The leadership within an organization is not like top down, or one person makes all the decisions, or in the case of youth, like the adults make the decisions and the youth just are involved. But the people who are the most impacted by whatever issue it is, multiple issues that an organization is working on, the folks who are the most impacted by that, those are the people that are in leadership in the organizations that are the most competitive and eligible for our grants. What these grants do not fund is social services, education programs, or research that are not linked to a clear organizing strategy. That's not to say that if you have social services programs or you have educational programs or you do research in your organization, it's not to say that we're not going to fund you. But because we are looking to invest in community organizing specifically, we know that all three of those types of programs can be an integral part of organizing, but they in and of themselves are not organizing. So they can be a component, but then how is the organization addressing the root cause? How are they organizing to shift power? We go back to those the pillars of our grant making. We don't fund individuals. Similarly, we don't fund organizations with strong leadership from only one individual, or like, yeah, I was going to say, or two individuals, but I guess we haven't actually had that as a criteria, so I won't say that. So organizations with strong leadership from only one individual are not being run in a manner that is consistent with what I was talking about before in terms of folks who, leadership coming up from the bottom. That sort of model is more about one person making the decisions. We also don't fund other grant making organizations or scholarships. We don't fund organizations with budgets greater than $250,000. So that's how we define small grassroots organizations. And then we also don't fund any organizations who have their primary work outside of the United States, the US territories, Mexico, or Haiti. So that means that we do fund in all 50 states of the United States, all US territories, that includes Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands. I should study up on all of my US territories. We also fund in Mexico and Haiti. So the application process is that the application will open on Friday, November 18th. That's this Friday. And it will be open until January 6th. So we actually have extended the application period a little bit so that it actually gives folks a little extra time to write their applications and for us to start to, vet applications as well. Feel free to turn it in before January 6th. Somebody pointed out to me that January 6th is now a date that will go down in our history, and perhaps this January 6th, I will have some hope because there will be all of these amazing community organizing applications that will come into our database. So we take the month of January and much of February to review those applications and winnow it down to a group of finalists. And those finalists will be notified in February. So if you haven't heard from us after you've submitted your application, if you haven't heard from us for a while, that may be because you're still in the running. But you will hear one way or another by the end of February. So if you haven't heard from us and it's March, then yes, please reach out to me. In March, then, for folks who are finalists, for organizations who are finalists, there will be a short supplemental application due. And then our reviewers will do interviews with people from your organization, as well as people that you put down as references for your organization. And then the final grant notifications will happen in April. Our board of directors ratifies all of the application, all of the grant decisions, and makes the grant decisions for their docket in April. So we'll send out those notifications then. And at about the same time, we will also notify organizations that have been selected for what we call Grassroots Funding Week. Some of you may be familiar with Grassroots Funding Week already. It's an annual event that we do online for raising additional funds for an organization's grant. And every dollar that we receive through those fundraisers, minus the credit card fees, goes into that organization's grant, dollar for dollar. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Not every grantee is put into Grassroots Funding Week, but about half. So then kind of what generally does it mean to get a grant from Peace Development Fund? For one thing, general operating funds are prioritized. We have always believed that organizers know best about how to spend the money that we grant to them for their work. So we we believe in general operating funds, general operating fund grants. During the COVID crisis of 2020, especially, a lot of foundations were having to rewrite grant agreements with their grantees in order to change the deliverables because, gee, we can't have that in-person meeting anymore, or this program had to be completely shut down, or what have you. We didn't have to do any of that with our grantees. We just said, we gave you this grant to fulfill the mission that you set forward in your application. As long as you are continuing to do that, you are fulfilling your grant obligation to us. So that's one of the many reasons why we believe in general operating funding. Grassroots Funding Week is for about 15 organizations that get funded by us will be included in this additional fundraising opportunity. It will include trainings on crowdfunding and how to grow your donor base. And at the end of it, you will be provided with a list of all of the donors that gave to your organization's page during that fundraising week. We've seen it in the past as a real opportunity for organizations to involve more people in their organization in fundraising and advertise that they got this grant from the Peace Development Fund and raise more money for their organization. We also have other capacity building offerings. I do webinars on topics like fundraising and nonprofit management. And all of our grantees have access to a one-on-one consultation with PDF staff. If they have a question about, some other grant that they want to go after, or they just need advice about something, or they want to have, a specific topic, we can help. We might not be able to help them, in exactly that thing that they're moving toward, but we can steer them in the room. Also a community of other grantee organizations. We host Peace Talk on a regular basis, which during the COVID time has been virtual, but we also in the past have done in person. Of course, that's difficult to do for national grant making. So the the online events have been useful for gathering grantees together from a geographically diverse area. And it's an opportunity for organizations to talk about their work and be in conversation with other grantees, as well as with donors, or either donors to our organization or donors to your organization, or potential donors, and other funders. So that's one place that community exists. Another place is actually through these capacity building webinars, because they are open to all different types of organizations. Then folks have definitely met through those convenings. And I try and have them be as interactive as possible so that those connections can happen. And then there's the possibility for deepening through our special initiatives. That those things happen like once every 5 years or so and are on specific topics. So obviously, I don't know that that any one of your organizations would be necessarily included in one of those special initiatives, but especially if you see connection with some of the other grantees within the PDF grantee base, let's talk about that, because those special initiatives are a way that PDF, as it talked about in the video, can convene organizations for deeper collaboration and thinking. So this is a bit of a boiling down of a quote that our executive director, Paul Heibel, said to me one time. He said, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but basically feel like PDF is watering the seedlings of the social justice movement. I had mentioned that idea of seedlings before. So seeds are things that have potential and haven't yet sprouted. We are not quite, supporting that level of organization, but once an organization has started to sprout and is starting to get a foothold in their community, starting that work, and still in the process of growing, that's the sweet spot for the Peace Development Fund. Organizations that don't have access to other types of funding necessarily are prioritized for sure. Organizations that are showing a trajectory. Oftentimes, Peace Development Fund is, if not the first funder of the organization, then one of the first funders, and usually the first national foundation that funds many of our grantees. So then that organization can take the Peace Development Fund grant and tout it to other foundations. Other foundations definitely will look at the fact that an organization has gotten a grant from Peace Development Fund as it were, a seal of approval for doing community organizing work and deeply rooted community organizing work, because our review process is so thorough. This is just a recent picture of of some of our staff. That's me and my dog, better known as our office mascot. And this is in our office in Amherst. We also have an office, Amherst, Massachusetts. We also have an office in San Francisco, California, where our executive director and one of our other staff members operate as well. And this is just kind of some more information. As I mentioned, the application isn't live yet. It will be going live on Friday. So our grant guidelines and the link to the application will be live on our website on Friday. And it's this website here. These slides will be sent to you after to anybody who registered for the event afterwards. Or you can just go to our website and there should be a banner on our website on Friday as well, I believe. And then, if you have questions about the grant guidelines, after reading them thoroughly, please, you can set up, a conversation with me. I oversee all of our grant making programs here at PDF. Or if you have a question about the application form itself, like if something is not working about the application, you can reach out to me or call our office. And also, if you're interested in our fiscal sponsorship program, we have an info session about that. You can also set up a call with me to talk about fiscal sponsorship, because I also oversee our fiscal sponsorship program, if that's something that you are interested in. So as we talked about, or as I talked about earlier, the Peace Development Fund works to build the capacity of community-based organizations through grants, training, and other resources. We see ourselves as partners in human rights and social justice movements. And again, that public foundation, as a public foundation, we nurture, foster, and encourage the diverse, self-sustaining, and economically viable communities that are essential to building a peaceful, just, and equitable world. So that's our mission and vision again. And thank you. This is just a little bit about me, and I really want to thank you for coming today. I am going to stop my screen share and and then see if any folks want to ask questions while the video is still running. And then I'm going to pause the video or stop the video afterwards if there are any other questions that folks want to say offline, as it were. Any questions for now? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I am going to stop the recording.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, when it was 2021, I believe, 2020, yeah, 2021, we got a grant, a community organizing grant, and we were in that week of so forth of the additional
Grassroots funding.
Grassroots funding, yes. And I don't think I ever saw where, at least prior to that, what the initial amount of the grant was. So I don't really know how much
You raised on top of it?
actually was raised during that fundraising week. This time, if we are selected for a grant, will there be will we be notified of what that initial grant is, so that we can kind of gauge our success on what we're able to raise during that week?
Yes, that actually was feedback that we got from other grantees as well. And so we changed that for last year's grants. So if you were one of the ones who gave us feedback about that before, thank you. Yes, we actually submit them now as even separate checks. So that it can be very clear. Yeah, great question. Any other questions before I stop the recording? Okay, now let's see if I can stop the recording.